If you are looking to start a gaming journal and on the hunt for layouts that you can include, then I have 100 ideas for you in this video. I've tried to include a range of options for all different types of gaming, so as we go through, think about whether you could apply it to whatever games you like to play, if there's any kind of tweaks or changes that you could make to make it more suitable for you. But jumping on in, the first idea we have is a gaming year in pixels. This one is set up so that we have a column for each of the months of the year, and then the days 1 through 31 down the side. Of course, not every month has 31 days, so the end of this tracker is kind of jagged to represent the number of days that are in each of the months. The way that you use this one is super flexible. You can use it to specify the types of games you were playing, how long you were playing for, whether you did or didn't complete a game in the day. In fact, you can actually include a mixture of all of those things, just based on what kind of colors or symbols you're using to represent the different types of information. While I have grouped this one so that each column is a month, you could also do it so that each column was a day of the week, and that way you can use the tracker to see when are you most likely to do your gaming. Are you more likely to play on like a Thursday and Friday? Are there certain days of the week that you don't really find yourself playing very much? That's not necessarily to make you play games every single day, but it can be interesting statistics to record. The next idea we have is an anticipated releases calendar. So this could be just for games, or it could be for updates that are coming, social events that are happening in your gaming community, DLC, anything gaming related. I've broken this one down so that we have each of the months of the year on one page, but if you have a lot of information to record, you might want to spread this one out over a full spread, so 2 pages, or over multiple spreads, so maybe 4 or even 6 pages. Really just depends on how much you have to record, or how much you want to record, and how big your handwriting is. After this one though, the next idea we have though are my gaming goals. Now of course, all of the layouts that we have in here are just ideas, they're not actually my specific gaming goals, but having a space to write down what your goals are means that you're more likely to actually accomplish them. These could be bigger or just smaller goals. Remember, your goals are very much your own. They don't have to be the same kind of things that everybody else is striving for. You don't need to be like top of the leaderboard or anything like that if you don't want to be. It could be about playing more diversely. So maybe getting into types of games, genres, or even consoles and platforms that you haven't experienced before. It could be about social gaming, so hosting a gaming night. Anything that you want to do or achieve through your gaming would go on a list like that. The next one we have can very much be helpful if you're the kind of person who's maybe a little bit new to the gaming space or new to the particular types of games, and that's having a game-related glossary. Now we can make this for just gaming in general, so like what is FPS, what is RTS? Or it could be game-specific terminology for games that you're trying to play. For instance, maybe there are certain enemy types that are given certain names in the community, and so you want to be able to communicate with your gaming friends, and a key part of communication is being able to decipher the language other people are using. Let me know if you know what each of these acronyms stand for. There may have been 1 or 2 that I had to look up. As we mentioned at the start, if there are any of these types of layouts or any of the types of ideas we have that don't really relate to your type of gaming, or if there are things missing, just know that this is coming from somebody who does not play super widely. I have the games that I like, but I wanted to make this as comprehensive a video for you as possible. The next idea we have though is a sizing reference, which is specifically for your gaming journal. So for instance, maybe if you like to do review layouts for your games, maybe there's a particular structure that you like to use and you don't want to have to go back and count out all of the boxes every single time you remake it. Having a little reference or a little guide in your journal can really help with getting those set up quickly, which means you have more time for gaming. Or more time to write the review, that's also a possibility. The next idea we have though is a gaming challenge calendar. So this can be for when specific challenges or community events are run for the games that you're playing, and noting down when those are going to be so that you can participate. I've included these ones with little mini calendars, so you could even possibly mark on the calendars when they were coming, maybe just using a little highlight dot or a line of color, something that makes those dates stand out. Flipping on over though, our next one is a gaming awards layout. Now this one can be for like officially recognized gaming awards, like best game of the year and all of that kind of stuff that are released by more official channels, or they can just be gaming awards that you yourself as a gaming enthusiast have decided to award to some of the games you like. The ideas I have on here are like your favorite game of the year, the one that you played the fastest, the one that took the longest, a game that had the best plot twists, maybe ones that had your favorite quest or mission, best co-op game, best sequel, the one that was the most played, and any kind of honorable mention. The categories you use, very much up to you, but it can be a little fun way to review your year of gaming, or your gaming overall. Of course, you can also include a year in gaming review. This one I kind of do in a similar style to like a Spotify Wrapped, but for games, and some gaming platforms will actually give you these kind of statistics, so if you primarily play on one kind of platform, that can be a really good place to find the statistics that you want to populate this layout with. On this one, we have some little numeric statistics at the top. We've got a little pie graph to break down the percentage play in terms of time. Maybe you could do hours played across each of the months, your top games of the year, a little kind of highlights reel of different games or gaming moments. Any kind of memory or statistic that you want to include would be good on a layout like this. While so far we've been looking at kind of big picture or like year in review type layouts, you can also do these things monthly. So maybe you want to have something like a monthly gaming timeline where you indicate what games you were playing across each of the days of the month. This one's done so that each of the columns represents a different game, and you just highlight whichever day you were playing those games. This can give you an indication of how long it took to complete the games or when you're most likely to play games. On the right hand side here though, we have what is effectively a key. So for each of the letters A through D, what is the title, what is the platform, and there's a little space for the game cover. Those ones you can just find online, print off, and stick in. Another monthly related layout you might want is a challenge that's specifically done within that month. It doesn't necessarily have to be a month-long challenge, but having it next to something like a monthly gaming tracker or something else that's monthly could be useful. I kind of think about these layouts similar to how I like to do my reading journal, where I have all of my monthly pages first and then have my book reviews after this. So if you did want to have monthly related pages in your journal, this is where that would go. The actual structure of a layout like this is very much going to depend on the type of challenge. You might have different stages you want to track, tasks that you need to do. If it's about XP or score, maybe some kind of tracker for that. And also having general challenge information means that when you come back to look at this layout, you'll know what everything was for. A layout that you might want to include at the end of the month though is a gaming month in review. So quite similar to the year in review, just taking a snapshot of one month. You can have sections like the best game of the month, you can have the different statistics related to the platform, genre, ratings that you gave the games, and also just a list of what you played and how long you spent with them. Our next section of gaming journal ideas is all related to your game collection and organization, but if you still needed a notebook to house all of these layouts in, then I would love to recommend the sponsor of today's video, Tifosi. Tifosi make an awesome range of beautiful notebooks which are really designed for any journaling style, and thus regardless of what type of games you play, if you're looking to make a gaming journal, then they're worth checking out. Their new range of B5 journals are great for anybody who has larger handwriting or just wants a lot of space to play, but my personal current favorite are their gold vintage dot grid notebooks, which is just such a gorgeous design and also comes in a range of colors. They don't just have dot grid options, so if you're looking for lined paper or different paper weight, then they've got you covered. All of the layouts that we have in this video have been set up in a Tifosi notebook, and if you wanted to grab something from their website, you can get 10% off your order with the code JashiiCorrin10. Just head over to Tifosi and explore their gorgeous range. In terms of layouts you can use for recording your game collection and organization, the first idea we have is a games played master list. This one would just have each of the games that you've played, so their title, maybe what platform you played them on. You can also include additional information like ratings or genres, but this one's just set up as a simple table. Something a little bit more decorative though is something like the My Game library. This one would be drawn up as a set of shelves, and you can just include little boxes for each of the different games. The ones we have along the top, I'm thinking more like disc-based games or ones that are probably digital, versus the ones underneath, which are probably more like board games. You don't have to make these to scale at all, that is super not necessary, but I have seen people color in the sides of the boxes in the same way they'd be colored like in their actual physical form, which can be a bit of fun. As said, not necessary, but it can be a fun touch. Flipping over though, another layout idea is a list of the things that you want to play. This is one that I definitely need to include in my journals because every time I go to play a game, I'm just like, I don't know what I want to play. And if I had a list like this, then at least I could run my eyes over it and see the things that I've previously said I was interested in. You can separate these lists out to organize them further, so maybe by type or platform or genre, but you can also indicate that information in other ways if you want to use a different style of organization too. The one we have down the bottom is a bit of fun, and if you're looking for the next game that you want to play but you don't necessarily want to pick it yourself, you could do something like a gaming lucky dip. For this one, you would just make a little pocket in your journal. I've just used some packaging material from a Tifosi notebook, and on little pieces of paper, you write out the different games that you might want to play. When it comes time to pick your next game, you just pick one of these out of the little pocket, and then whatever is said on that card is what you're going to play. Of course, if you pick it up and you're like, ooh, no, I don't really want to play that, then you don't have to, but it can be a fun way to pick your next play. Up the top here though, our next idea is a wish list, which can be especially helpful anytime you've got a birthday coming up, or maybe some kind of celebration where gifts are given. Having a list of ones that you've already specified as like, oh yes, I would like to acquire that and put it in my collection, can be very helpful to pass on to your loved ones. Similarly, it can also be nice to keep a list of the games that were gifted to you. So who were they from? Maybe have some additional information, like were you going to play it together? What rating did you give it? Not in so much so that you can go back to the person who gifted it to you and be like, yeah, you gave me this game and I only gave it 2 stars. But maybe if they consistently give you games you don't like, you might want to ask for something else from them. I've just drawn these ones out so that they're little boxes with a little kind of like bow or ribbon in each of the corners, just to make it look a little bit decorative. You don't have to do anything crazy to make your pages look nice. Another idea for a tracker that you can include is a game series tracker, especially when you find a particular game that you really enjoy. If it's part of a series, there's a pretty high possibility that you're going to enjoy the other games in the series. Maybe not necessarily as much, but you're not going to know until you play them. This one is just set up as simple checklists so that as you play them, you can color in the little box to say that you've done them. And then our next layout idea is just having a page for the covers of your games. I love printing out pictures of covers, whether it's books or movies or games, and sticking them into my journal. I just think it's a really nice visual to have. I make sure to include them on any kind of review layouts I'm doing, also any kind of like summaries like we have here. So any of the games in your collection, you can just print off their covers and stick them in. This could be kind of like a substitute for the layout idea we had back here. So rather than having them all drawn out, you can just print them off and stick them into your notebook. But you can of course have both. This is very much a pick your own adventure style thing. Any of the layout ideas we have in here that spark joy, you can include those, but you don't have to include all of them. The next idea we have though is the gaming backlist. So this is for any of those games that you've had for ages, they've been sitting around in your library, whether that's physical or digital or whatnot, and you keep meaning to play them, but you still haven't gotten to it. Having something like a list of those games and when you acquired them, and then a space to check off when you have played them, could be useful. Of course, you can check them off without playing them if you've maybe gifted them or donated them or sold them so that you don't have them in your backlist or in your library anymore. That can be a way to deal with them. But the next idea we have is a tracker for your subscription-based savings. This is for any of the games that you play as part of a subscription that you pay maybe like a monthly or a yearly fee, rather than going and buying the game for yourself. I effectively like to see it as whatever games you play under that, you're probably saving money on. Like you didn't have to buy just that one game, you're paying a fee to play a range of games. Of course, in whatever savings you do calculate based on the prices of those games, also factor in the fact that you paid for the subscription, but it can be a cool way to see whether your subscription is actually saving you money or maybe you're not making the most use out of it. Flipping on over though, our next idea is a list of betas to test. Now this is only for people who do test betas, but you could of course use this general structure for a different type of idea. In this one though, you would just list out what games you were playing and the kind of things maybe that you were trying to test with them. And then on the other side, you can list out any thoughts, ideas, questions, notes. You could also list out any kind of checklists or things that you need to do. It really depends on how involved in the beta test you are and any kind of requirements you have from testing it. The next idea though is to include a DNF graveyard. So DNF here stands for do not finish or did not finish. Oftentimes we see this more in the kind of reading space, but you can do it for games as well. If you're playing a game and you're just not vibing with the story, if you're finding it's more of a slog, it's not really fun, then you have full permission to just not finish it. I'm also a big believer in the idea that we get to decide what finished looks like, so for you this might be, no, I did finish. I got to chapter 5 out of 10 and that's finished for me. That's okay too, but if you wanted to keep a record of the games in particular that you didn't finish, maybe the story campaign or something like that, then having a space to note those down in your journal could be useful. The idea we have at the top here though is a Hall of Fame, so this is for your favorite games, the ones that have stood the test of time, they still remain your favorites, you loved playing them. You might not necessarily play them again, but they hold a special place in your heart. For me, that is Life is Strange, Slime Rancher, and Age of Empires 2. Excellent games. Let me know what would be in your Hall of Fame. Down the bottom though, we have memorable moments, so this is effectively memory keeping from some of your favorite gaming moments. I've taken a couple of pictures from gaming with my friends. This is where we had a glitch and people weren't really aligned as appropriately as they should be, and another game where we managed to convince everybody to play the same character. In this case though, you can just stick in some screenshots or pictures, write out some of the memories just so that you have them captured in your journal. It can sometimes be hard to remember those things, especially when maybe somebody on your team isn't pulling their weight and you're kind of getting a little bit more agitated than you are having fun. It happens to the best of us. The next couple of ideas we have are more specifically for people who like to rate and review the games they're playing, but one of those is having a rating scale. This is so that you can be consistent in applying your scale, whether that's 5-star, 10-star, 7-star. You also don't have to use stars, but having some kind of descriptor that tells you what each of those ratings mean could be really useful. This could also get a little bit more in depth or in detail, so rather than just an overall rating, maybe you're thinking more specifically about the character, or the graphics, or the storyline, any of the kind of individual elements, and giving each of those a rating, and then considering how they play into each other to give an overall rating. Very much depends on the kind of games you play and how in depth you want to go with it, but something that could be useful to consider when thinking about your ratings is having a set of questions that you like to apply to each of the reviews you're doing. Just like everything else in this video, it does depend on the kind of games you play. Like for instance, in tabletop games, you might be considering, were the pieces appropriate for the game? Were they too big, too small, cheap and nasty, easily lost? Versus a digital game where it's like, were the graphics good? Did they stand up to the test of time? Were there any parts where the audio just didn't match the overall feeling you were supposed to get from a scene? Having these go-to questions though to do your review means that you can do a more thorough job or apply the kind of same style every time. Of course, in your journal you can also include the reviews themselves. These could just be a space for kind of general journaling about the game, or you might want to go with a more structured view. So having a space for the title, space for the genre, how many hours you played, then maybe listing out the questions and your responses to them. A layout that I often include anytime I'm thinking about gaming layouts is something like a gamer score tracker. This is in particular because my general platform of choice is usually Xbox, but this could be some kind of like a trophy tracker, any kind of XP tracker, could also be a gaming completion tracker if you wanted to, like how many games have you fully completed to 100%. And depending on what statistics you like to keep track of, having a list of the stats that you do like to track could be useful too. Especially if you're setting up those monthly or yearly pages, having this reference means that you can include those on whatever layouts you make. Of course, I'm the kind of person who really loves stats, I really enjoy tracking them, but of course you can track too many statistics and then it kind of takes away from your enjoyment of the process. Make sure to find a good balance for yourself. Flipping on over, the next idea we have is a gaming rating summary. So this is where you would list out the games that you've played and the ratings that you've given them, kind of similar to the games played, except for this one we're more so thinking about what the ratings of those games were. You can very easily see where your 5 stars are, your 4 stars, 3 stars, so on and so forth. Something that could be fun to record in your journal are any plot twists, or in particular the ones that you think were done well, they were executed nicely. So you could write down what the twist was and maybe your response to that or your feelings about it. This is effectively a style of memory keeping, but more so specifically thinking about those really good plot moments. Another list or lists to include could be something like your gaming likes and dislikes. Now, I'm not so much thinking about like, you know, I'm playing Monopoly and I land on a hotel. More so I'm thinking about likes and dislikes that can maybe persuade or dissuade you from playing a game to start with. For instance, maybe one of the things you dislike in board games is structures where people are eliminated as the game goes on. It means that as people get eliminated, they kind of just awkwardly sit there for games night and they don't really have anything to do. That would definitely be one of my dislikes, mainly because it makes me feel awkward as a player, thinking like, oh, are those people not having fun? But then it also makes me feel kind of bummed as a person who gets kicked out of the game because you're like, cool, I'll just sit here. Having these like and dislike lists though can help you be more informed about which games you do pick up or do try and play, because if there are particular genres or mechanics or styles that you just don't like, then you can avoid those games in favor of ones that you do like. Talking about things we like though, you could of course have a space in your journal dedicated to any characters that you love, you like, you relate to. I included Clementine, and you could just write some notes about why you like them. You could also just include their picture and make it kind of like a Hall of Fame thing. But then down the bottom here we have gaming habits or me as a gamer. This is effectively just writing a little profile for yourself, so thinking about things like, what are my favorite genres? What's my favorite platform? What kind of gaming habits do I have? What are my kind of maybe buying habits in terms of games? This could be done as a general overview, so just keeping very kind of generic or general prompts, or it could be a snapshot in time. So thinking about like currently, what is my favorite game? Currently, what is a game that I have most recently not finished or something like that. Essentially another type of memory keeping layout, but gaming related. On to the next page, and we're getting into our category related to social and multiplayer gaming. Now, as said before, there are certain types of games that I play a lot of, and there are games that I don't play a lot of. Multiplayer is definitely one of those. I'm partial to a co-op, but when it comes to like larger multiplayer online games, I don't play a lot of those. So as we go through, think about the layout ideas themselves, think about the structure, whether you want to apply them to other things, but also if you have any other page ideas, we would love to hear them in the comments. I effectively want to make this video and the comment section the most complete compendium of gaming layout ideas, but the first one we have for this section is just a place for your multiplayer stats. For this, I would probably make it a structured layout that you set up month after month, so specifying what is the month in question, what game are we looking at here, and then including things like your KD ratio, your rank, how many matches or games you actually played, do you have any accuracy statistics, do you have any kind of like progression that you've made, any kind of stats that you want to include as related to your multiplayer game. Similar to this, you can also include any ranked player statistics, so maybe you have different categories and what kind of ranking or rating you got in those. And then we have some lists of other information you could include down here. So how many matches? What was your win-loss ratio? Did you have any MMR change? What was your best match? Maybe what was your worst match? Any kind of stats, analysis, or personal goals related to your ranked play statistics. The next one we have though is a team build or breakdown. So this is thinking about the people on your team and what kind of roles they're playing. You could have different builds and different roles that people are playing because of that. And depending on the game, you might be able to represent this with a simple letter to represent the type of role they're playing, or you might actually want to write out a character name. If you play with the same group of people every single time, it means that everybody knows what their role is going to be for the particular build that you're using. One of the things that can be the most fun when it comes to playing with other people is trying to coordinate everybody's schedules, so having some kind of a roster or a schedule layout could be really helpful for keeping on track of when people are available. This one is just set up as a simple calendar with a key on the side here, so I can see what role I'd be playing, what would be the start time of our session, how long are we going to be playing for. This is another one that it might be better to expand this over a full spread, 2 pages, just so that you can include that information and make it very legible, very visible. Something related to this could also be a time zone conversion, especially if you're playing with people who aren't in your time zone, just so you know, like, hey, if I message you at 3 PM my time, it's actually like 9 PM your time or something similar. Don't want to bother people while they're trying to sleep. Another layout you could include though is any kind of gaming club notes. Depending on what kind of gaming club you're part of, the actual structure of these notes might be a little bit different, but the ones we have in here are a space for session notes, when the next session is going to be, any loot that was found by either yourself or your party, any NPCs you encountered, any checklist items you have, or things that you wanted to do as a party. As said, does very much depend on the type of club and the type of game you're playing. And while this is a journal-related ideas video, you could also do this digitally so that you have a template that you just use time and time again, which could be really useful. Down the bottom here though, this idea is a buddy gaming list. So this is a list of games you want to play and who you want to play them with. Some of our gaming buddies aren't necessarily going to be the ones that we play every single game with, though sometimes we do. So if you have a range of gaming friends who all play different types of games and you want to play specific things with them, having a list of who you're playing what with could be kind of helpful. Another thing that I always very much appreciate from my friends are recommendations of games. So having a space to write down those recommendations so that then when you come to either get a new game or play a new game, you can refer to this list and see what your friends have recommended. I've done this one with little checklist stickers, so as you play them you could color them in, but you could just have this as a very simple list as well. Another social related layout is more so related to social media, and that is a space to dedicate to your favorite gaming content creators. In this kind of space you could put in a little picture of maybe their display picture or their avatar, write down who the creator is, what games they play, and what kind of days they either stream or release content, whether that be videos, blogs, whatever else. The next section of ideas we have though are all related to role-playing games. They don't necessarily have to be D&D, but some of them definitely would work for that. And our first layout idea is a character sheet. On such a layout, you can have a little space for a picture of your character. You can write down things like what their name is, their pronouns, classes and levels, species, ancestry, lineage, background. There are a lot of different sections on this one, and as you can probably tell, it is a print off. This one was actually a free download that I found online, and you can find a lot of really good templates online for these, which is very helpful. Even if you don't necessarily print it off and stick it in, you could always recreate this into your journal. You of course don't need to include every single area if it's not relevant to you, and if I were going to recreate this in my journal, I'd probably spread it across an entire spread just so that I had plenty of room to write all of these things down. The next idea we have though is a gear list, so listing out what is the piece of gear, like what is its name, the quantity, the weight, any details you want to record. This also could be other inventory, so like maybe how much currency do you have? We don't want to get to a point where our character can't carry things. If you're playing a digital game, oftentimes these are done by like a kind of pack breakdown, like a grid of the items you can carry in your pack, so you can think about like how many grid spaces do those things take up. That way you can prioritize items based not just on how little space they take up, but also how useful they are to your character. Another idea we have though is a character progression tracker, so looking at the different skills you have and maybe the different levels for that skill. As you progress through them, you could just check them off, and you could also tie this to like the amount of experience required to get to those levels. Maybe make it less of a tracker, more of a reference, just depending on the type of game you're playing. On to the next page though. For this idea, we have a character playtime log. In this one, you'd list out the characters that you commonly play, and then for each day, week, gaming session, whatever else, you just list down how much time you played with each of them. I've done this based on the months, so January, February, so on and so forth, but you can use this to record any span of time you want. The idea here might not necessarily be to have equal playtime between your characters, but more so just seeing who your preferred characters are. Very much depends on what you want to do with the information. Another fun one to include can be a backstory for your character, especially if you've gone to the trouble of listing out all of their statistics and stuff. Having a backstory to go with them could be fun. This could be a character that you've made for yourself, or it could be a character in whatever game you're playing and just writing out some notes about where they came from, what their background is, just giving some context to them as a character. It's also good to note that these ideas don't have to be limited to RPG style games. You can use them for different styles of gaming. Just for the purpose of having an organized video, we're putting these ideas in this one. The next idea though is having a space for party notes. So who is in your gaming party and who are their characters? What kind of role do they have in the party? You can make this very, very simple, so just a simple list for each of those. Or you might want to have some more dedicated profiles that go into a bit more information. A layout that's a bit more relevant to people who are actually designing the games they're playing, you could have a space for campaign planning. Now, as someone who has not planned a campaign before, this is kind of just basic information, but you can get very detailed into it, very granular. Things we have here are things like the world name, what kind of area or place are you in inside of that world, where is our campaign starting, why are we meeting up as a party, what's the local geography like, what is our adventure going to entail, and you could also start to brainstorm things like plot points, key decisions that need to be made, anything that's going to be very important in the campaign you're planning. This is one where it might pay to have a bit of a brainstorming space so you can get a bit messy with it, and then come into a structure like this when you've kind of sorted out the details. Flipping over, another idea we have is NPC notes. So as you meet different characters along your journey, maybe writing down who they are so that you can remember them next time you come across them. You don't have to include a picture of them, I just like the idea of it, but writing down who they are, what are their wants, what kind of things are you hoping to gain from them by working with them, and any other information that might be useful. To keep track of the stuff that you're hoping to do in your game, having some kind of a mission or objectives log could be really useful. This could either be a space where you write out the stuff that you have done, or write out the stuff that you want to do and check it off as you accomplish it. This will just help you keep track of the things that you might have in theory signed up for with your NPCs that you've met, and make sure nobody gets disappointed when you don't investigate the missing town folk. Where did they go? I don't know. Another layout to include could be an inventory and loot log, so breaking it down based on the mission that you went on, what you obtained from that. You can also keep specific notes about that loot, so maybe its rarity or its value, whether it's actually going to be useful or whether you're planning on selling it, or breaking it down for parts to make other things, of course. Similar to the objective or mission tracker, you can also have a quest and achievement log. A lot of these terms are very interchangeable, just really depends on the context of the game you're playing, but this one in particular would be broken down by the different stage or quest mission that you were on, and the achievements that could be gained at those times. This one is also broken down so it has the XP tied to each of those achievements. But the next idea is having a space to record any world building or lore relevant to your game. This could be because you're designing the game yourself, or it could be a style of memory keeping for any game you're playing. I love the idea of recording game maps and like annotating them and stuff, having pictures of the different maybe classes or races in your game. You can effectively make it like a traveler's diary or something. So thinking about kind of embodying your character and making a little compendium for them as they go about their adventure. I think that'd be pretty cool. Up next though, this idea is a dungeon or raid strategy list. How you break these down can be based on a lot of different factors. Maybe it could be like who is in your party at the time and thus how you're going to approach it. It could be the type of dungeon or raid you're doing. It could be the dungeon or raid in question and how you want to tackle that very specific one. And these could be strategy notes that were learned kind of on the job, like you've learnt from you and your team how you like to approach it, or it could be research done ahead of time. The structure of this one is that we have a type space over here where you just describe the type of dungeon or raid you're doing, and then a bulleted list of the strategies you're going to be applying. Under this though, the next idea we have is a space for crafting recipes. I very much am the kind of person who anytime it comes to crafting in a game, have to look up a walkthrough or a recipe or something like that so I know what I have to collect and how I need to apply it to get the thing that I want. If you too have difficulties with remembering the kind of stuff you need, then maybe having a record of it in your journal could be useful, especially for the things that you craft often but still find yourself forgetting what you need for them. The next idea though is a reputation tracker. This is going to mean different things for different types of games, and it also could mean different things for different scenarios within the same game. For instance, maybe your reputation for your character is different with different characters. Having a place to record that so that you approach interactions with those characters appropriately could be useful. A layout idea that I think is a lot of fun is something like a tech tree or research paths within your game. Now these can kind of get quite complicated quite quickly depending on the game you're playing, and can be very detailed or involved, so I just decided to do one as a print off. Let me know if you know which game this is from. You could also print this off in such a way that you can color things in as you research that thing or accomplish a different tier in the system you've got, just if you want to keep track of your progress through the tech tree. The idea we have after this though is a build order, or what could be a build planner. I do this one as a checklist so that anytime I load up this game in particular, I know what I want to build in what order, especially because in some games, the order you build things in can really make or break you in terms of the success of that game. I wouldn't set this one up so that I would like have to rigidly follow it every single time, but it's more like a recommendation of a winning strategy. You could also have different build orders depending on how you want to approach the game, so if there are different ways of winning, then possibly the order you build things might change slightly. But flipping on over, the next idea we have, I would be a terrible partner if I didn't include something about Pokemon in here. My partner Vogel plays a lot of Pokemon. But as you can see, this one is a strength and weakness chart. Now this one is thinking about the different types of Pokemon and whether they are kind of weak or strong against each other. The nice part is you can find a lot of great graphics online for this one, but for some games they don't have them, so you might have to make them yourself. This could also be thinking about what kind of weapons are really good against certain enemy types, which is also related to the idea we have at the bottom, which is unit counters. So if you encounter a particular type of enemy, what are their weaknesses? Like what is the best idea for how to approach them so that you come away unscathed? Or as unscathed as possible. Another idea we have though is a skill improvements log. So this is thinking about the different skills that you have in this game and the different types of improvements that could be made. This one is set up in the Alistair method, so we have a column for each of the different skills that you're building, and then along the side here you just write out individual improvements. Those improvements won't relate to every single skill, so you just put a little dot or a little cross underneath the relevant skill column. That way you don't have to make like separate sections for each of the skills and kind of like guess how much space you'll need for each of them. I would just make this one as a long running list down the entire of the page, and then indicate which skill each of the improvements I've recorded are for by using a dot in the relevant space. The next idea we have though is a space for map callouts, mainly so that you know how to refer to different places you are on the map, especially if you're playing with other people and you're like, oh yeah, I'm over in the corner. And they're like, cool, which corner, buddy? Especially on maps where the structure kind of changes each time you play, it can be a little bit difficult, but there are typically certain loadouts that are more common, so knowing how to refer to where you are so that you can strategize with your team is pretty important. Another thing that can be good to note on here is the next idea we have, which is the strategy or kind of like choke points or anything like that that is on this particular map. So marking in different kind of like key locations and how your game style or play style will change based on being in that spot. Like if you encounter the enemy here, how is that going to be different compared to encountering them here? Of course, just like everything, it's game dependent, but it could be good to include. Flipping on over though, the next idea though is a playstyle menu. So this is thinking about the different playstyles that you have in your game, maybe which ones you favor, how they work, and you could also think about how to counter certain playstyles. This one is more so just a simple list style that's, a little bit more decorative than a simple list, but you could set this one up as a table or as individual kind of like cards that describe what the playstyle is, how you'd counter it, which characters are best to use for certain playstyles. That could also be good to record. But down the bottom here, the next idea is a best and worst strategy list. This one would probably be more of a personal thing. It's like, which strategies work well for me versus which strategies don't work well for me. Like maybe you just can't really get the hang of them, you find them very hard to apply, or maybe there are too many counters for that strategy, so you just kind of want to avoid them. While I would record something like this for an individual game, you might want to record it for multiple games on one layout, so having some kind of key to indicate what game each of these are for could also be useful to include. At the top of the right hand page though, this idea is having an army composition list. So this is thinking about the different unit types that you have in your army and how many of each of those units you have, mainly so that when you go to build your army, you can scan your eye over the list and make sure that you have all of the ones that you need. You might also want to have multiple of these lists for different play styles or different tactics that you're using, and what can also be good to include with them is some kind of like formation for any battles you're going into. This could be dependent on the army composition, so who goes where based on how many of each type you have, or it could be for different strategies that you're applying with that army. So for instance, if we're thinking about like different map structures and how you're approaching your enemy or where you're kind of coming into battle with your enemy, how would your battle formation change based on where you were? One that is specifically for digital games is any kind of AI behaviors, anything that you can kind of rely on for the computer that you're playing, and how they'll approach the battle and what you can do in accordance with that. So for instance, you might find that particular opponents that you verse are always going to attack fast or something like that. What kind of strategies or tactics can you then apply to make sure that you don't get caught up in whatever attacks they're throwing your way? You might find that when you're versing particular people in Pokemon, maybe they always start with a particular Pokemon or always start with a particular move. Taking note of those means that you can counter them in a timely manner. Flipping over though, our next idea is a scenario or challenge mode tracker. For this one, we would list out the different challenges or scenarios that we want to play more of, and then keep track of how many times we played those. That could be instances of playing them, it could be instances of winning each of those challenges or scenarios, or it could be maybe the number of hours played, any kind of metric that shows how much of that challenge or scenario you've been playing. Again, the idea here might not necessarily be to get like perfect balance between them, but maybe indicate your favorites or log any kind of practice time you're getting with them. As already mentioned, I love the idea of including game maps in a gaming journal. I think it's a lot of fun, but in terms of how to use these game maps, you might want to indicate any kind of like territory or control on them, or any kind of strategy for regaining control of a territory. While a map of where is safe or not safe to go can be useful, if it's the kind of game where you can make your territory bigger, then you could indicate how to regain that territory on your map as well. These kind kind of game maps can also be used to indicate the kind of like sequence of play or like what happened in the game. So it's like this army came in and then this army cut them off and then these guys retreated or like whatever. But it's another kind of memory keeping you can do for your gaming. The idea we have at the bottom is a ranked play log or tracker, and we did have one related to ranked play before, but that one was more of a statistics on an individual month basis, whereas this one is more so thinking about it over time. So in this case, we have a row for each of the months of the year, and as part of that, you can record your tiers, your win-loss ratio, any kind of XP gained, and also add in any other columns for statistics you want to track as well. That means you can compare your progress over time, see if maybe you're tending in the direction you want to be, or if possibly the strategies and tactics you're employing aren't really working out. A game type we haven't talked about a lot yet are card games, so having something like a deck list could be useful if it's the kind of game where you have to build your deck. As part of this, you could have the core cards you include, you could have some of the ones that you might substitute in or swap in. If it's a multi-deck structure, so you have like the core deck or main deck and then an extra deck, then having the cards related to that could be useful to record as well. And you could also have any other substitute cards you want to include too. Depending on how many cards you need to include in the deck, you might need more space than just this. And in terms of the highlighted column, this would be to record how many of that type of card you want. Another thing to record for card games could be your favorite card combos. This is listing out the cards required and how you would use them together. You might need a little bit more space than this, but of course this is just an idea, so I just tucked it in the corner here. Flipping over though, our next idea are popular deck trends, and possibly how to counter them. As part of this, you would record the name of the build for the deck. You'd also put in a description of the build. You can write out any key cards that are included, the play style that goes with using those cards, and list out the ways that you could counter them with the deck that you typically use. As we've already mentioned, you don't have to just use this structure for card deck games. You could use a similar thing for army-based games. So is there a build for a particular type of army or particular type of enemy? What are the key units as part of that? What is the play style that typically goes with it? And how could you counter that with the army that you usually use? At the bottom though, keeping on the theme of cards, we have a card inventory list. So keeping track of all of the cards you have in your collection. You could also expand this to consider whether you've like loaned them out to people if you have that kind of a system. We want to make sure that those cards come back to us. And we also want to record how many of each cards we have. You could also include notes like rarity or how strong that card is or anything like that. But another idea is including a card wish list. I would also include this one with the price, mainly because if you have a little bit of extra money and you wanted to go buy yourself some cards, you can prioritize the ones that are maybe cheaper and within the budget you set for yourself, or you could also keep track of when those cards go on sale, if that ever happens. As you acquire them though, you can just check them off. Moving into our next section though, the first idea for this one is a game progress tracker. So this is thinking about like the chapters or the story beats that you're going to be experiencing and checking those off as you go through. As we already know, I love a game map, so mine's done as a map of different like parts or sections in the game, maybe different locations, and checking them off as you go through. And another type of tracker is an achievement tracker. I typically use online trackers for this just because it's a little bit easier and some games have a lot of achievements, but if you're really into your game and you want to write them down, then heck to the yes, you can put that in your game journal. This would be another one where I'd use the little check boxes and just color them in as I achieve them. You don't have to use stickers like these ones. You can just draw in a checkbox. I just think it makes it look a little bit fun. On to the next layout though. For this idea, we have walkthrough notes, especially if you want to make sure that you pick up all of those achievements we had on the last page. Making sure you know when you need to get them can be very useful. You don't necessarily have to handwrite these either. You can find these walkthrough notes online, print them off and stick them in. Can be very helpful for when you want to spend more time gaming than you do writing. The next idea though is a game summary. Now this one isn't so much a game review like we had before, where you're very much like picking apart the game, thinking about like, are the characters good? Is the atmosphere good? Is the plot done well? Anything like that. This is more so little snippets of information. So maybe your rating, what genres does it fit within? Is it an actual replayable replayable game, or have you played it once and that's kind of all you're going to do with it? You can of course include a spot for thoughts if you want to, and I always love including the game cover next to any of those thoughts so that I can see at a glance what I've recorded. Another layout idea that could be fun to include is any house rules that you have, especially for board games or any kind of like tabletop games that you're playing like with people in person. Are there any particular rules that you typically like to apply, but maybe they're not things that everybody uses? So we're thinking things like free parking, being able to stack the draw twos in Uno, anything like that. Having a spot to record what they are can be a very handy reference, especially when you have to explain those house rules to somebody else. Rather than just trying to explain it off the cuff, you can come back to the layout that you've written up for yourself and just read off the page. The next idea we have though is a loadout builder. This would be one where I'd list out different types of loadouts depending on playstyles, so possibly recording what the playstyle is and then what each of the different perks or weapons or whatever else you need to load out with, writing those down for that particular playstyle. This can be especially helpful if there are a lot of options and you don't necessarily want to go looking through each and every one of them, reading the different kind of like perks or specialities for every single one. Having done that research ahead of time means that when it comes to game time, you have more time to game. Of course, depending on the game you're playing, the structure of this is going to change. And similarly, if you're going to be having any game-specific challenges that you're recording in your journal, the information you might want to record for those will change too. For the example we have here, this would just be the rules associated with a challenge, but you might want to also include a tracker or any kind of like character information or anything like that, just depending on the game that your challenge is based in, and the nature of the challenge itself. Our next idea though is X games in the year. So typically I would call this like 25 games in 2025, or maybe 20 games in 2025. You don't have to match it to the year, I just think it's a little bit of fun. But if you have a certain number of games that you want to play in the year and list out what those games are, then that is what this layout is. On this one we just have a dot so that you can check off as you play those games, keeping track of the ones that you have played versus the ones you're yet to play. And a similar but slightly different layout is the idea of 10 times 10, or any number times any number. So this one being 10 games that you want to play 10 times across a period of time. So for instance, a year, probably not a month. I don't know if I'm going to be able to play 10 games 10 times in 1 month. But this can really help with any games that are replayable and you want to play more of them, but you just don't find yourself picking them up. Having a tracker like this can hold us accountable to getting in and getting our playtime. Another layout that could be useful to include, just depending on the type of games you're playing, is something like content warnings. Now this could be triggers, it could be accessibility features, just stuff that you want to look out for, mainly because it's going to impact your gaming experience and we want to make sure we're having a positive gaming experience. The structure of this one is just 2 lists, one for things that we're okay with and one for things that we are not okay with, mainly so that if we're coming across a new game, we can run our eyes over this list and just make sure that nothing is going to make our experience of that game less than ideal. That doesn't necessarily mean we won't play it, it just means that we'll go into that with the knowledge that there might be some stuff in there we need to watch out for. Another fun thing that you can do with your gaming is something like gaming bingo. This one has been set up so it would be kind of like hosting a games night at your house and different things that could happen as part of that. You could also make it so that everybody at your games night has a board with different tiles on it, which just be kind of like a fun side game to the main attraction of the games you were already playing. As these items happen though, you just color it in, and then once you get a full line, whether that's vertical, horizontal, or diagonal, then you win a bingo. Though some people treat a whole board as a bingo, which might be a little bit challenging. Another layout you can include, in particular for the games you really enjoy, is something like a game collage. This could be multiple games together, so taking little screenshots or images, snapshots, cover pictures, character pictures, and putting them together in a collage. Or you could do it for just a single game, possibly taking the same elements we already described, or maybe finding pictures on Unsplash or Pinterest that are kind of related to the overall vibe of the game, essentially as a way of memory keeping. Now, memory keeping is a big one, so gaming memory keeping, you can do that in your journal. It doesn't have to be super structured, you could just have it like you print off the little cover of the game, write in some notes about it. You could also have pictures of your experience with the game. So for instance, if you were having a gaming night, having pictures from that event and putting those in your journal, that would be really fun. The stuff that you write in your memory keeping is fully up to you. It could be about your experience with the game, it could be about things around or outside of the game. game, like maybe why you decided to pick it up, what was going on with life at the time, anything relevant to your experience. And another fun extra to include would be something like a gaming challenge ideas list. Now, I would probably be listing out what the details of the challenge are, also what game they apply to, if there are people that you actually want to undertake this challenge with, or if you're going to be doing it by yourself, and also possibly if you do undertake the challenge, having a memory keeping space related to it could be fun as well. I find that oftentimes when I undertake a gaming related challenge, I have a lot of fun doing the challenge, but then I don't have anything to look back on to say that I did the challenge outside of like a little digital box that says like, oh yeah, achievement unlocked or something like that. Having some memory keeping related to it would be really fun. One type of challenge you might want to undertake is gaming throughout the ages, which is effectively just taking either a span of time, whether that be like decades or like 5-year periods, or individual years, and trying to play a game released in that span of time. I've done this one based on individual years, so for each of the years you just write down a title of a game, and as you play it, you check it off. Or, as you play a game, you check what year it was released and then write it into your tracker. Gaming and setting up all these layouts obviously takes time though, so having a reference in your journal about how to get more gaming into your schedule could be good too. If you find it particularly hard to find time to game, or if you want to make it more part of your routine but you just don't really have it in there established just yet, having a little list of go-to tactics could be useful for that. I'd probably stick that into the front of my gaming journal so that it was very nice and easily accessible. The idea we have at the bottom here though is having a plan for your gaming night or day. So specifying things like when is it going to happen, where is it going to happen, who's coming along, what games are we going to play, what kind of supplies do I need, should always have a snack list. But keeping all of that information in one spot can be really useful to make sure that your gaming event goes as smoothly as possible. You don't want to rock up to the game night and realize, oh, the person who was supposed to bring Ticket to Ride didn't bring Ticket to Ride. Now nobody can ride, and that would be a bummer. If you find that you're the kind of person who typically doesn't play a lot of games because anytime you come to do your gaming, you can't figure out what to play, then something like a what to play next layout could be really helpful. On this one, I would record things like my all-time favorite game, maybe something that I comfort play. It doesn't really need a lot of effort or energy to play and it just feels kind of nostalgic. And then also a spot to record something that's been on my radar, or maybe multiple somethings. That way I could just have a little scan of the page, see some inspiration of things I could play, and pick from that lineup. It does help to kind of narrow down the options, maybe picking from 3 or just 6 options, compared to your entire catalog, which might be like 50 or more games. 6 options is much less overwhelming. Similarly, there might be some things that you want to play more of. They could be specific games, or they could be types of games, genres, styles. In this kind of structure, you would list out what those things are in this kind of category column, and then every instance of playing that would go towards the count for the month. So these initials just representing the different months of the year, and let's just say one of these was like, I don't know, survival horror or something, and I played survival horror games 6 times in January, so I just write a little 6 in that column there. Again, the idea of tracking that kind of information can just help you be more accountable to playing more of the things that you want to play more of. One of the things that I super love for certain games in particular is recording any glitches, bugs, or funny moments. Any kind of screenshot of something silly that happens in The Sims, I love those kind of pictures. So anytime it happens to you, maybe just take a screenshot and stick it into your journal. That way you can have a record of all of those funny moments, so if you need to pick me up, you can come to that page. Another layout that can help you keep track of your gaming though is something like a gaming Kanban board. So this is where you would have different sections based on the different stages of playing a game. For instance, this one we have to play, playing, played, and reviewed. And then on each of these little sticky notes, you just write in a title of a game. If, for instance, you take a game and you start playing it, you just pull up the sticky note and put it into the playing section. And then once it's completely finished, you can move that to the played section. Of course, the different sections depend on the kind of games you're playing and what you need to do or want to do with them, but it can be a good way to visualize the games you have on the go versus the ones that you still want to play or the ones that you've finished with. Of course, anytime I do a themed journal, like a gaming journal, one of the things that I like to start with is just a list of layout ideas. Hopefully while you've been watching this video, you've been going through and jotting some ideas down, whether they be the ones specifically in this notebook or other ideas you've had as you've gone through. And if there are any ideas that I've missed, because there are definitely more ideas than just the ones we have in this video, make sure to drop them into the comments. Go check the comments from other people so that you can build the most complete list of layouts that you want to include in your gaming journal. But if you are on the hunt for more journal inspiration, then be sure to subscribe to the channel and check out the playlist on screen next. That one has a bunch of our previous journal related idea videos, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.